This is a sermon against the kids' table. I don't usually preach against things. But this is a sermon against the kids' table. See, kids' table culture tells us kids are not welcome at all the tables. The kids' table tells the adults that we cannot handle children at our table. And it tells the children, well, there's really no hope of you handling yourselves. The kids' table is yet another random border, a line of demarcation that someone declared and instituted, and then for years everyone just assumed, well, that's just the way things have to be. No question. See, adults are pretty good at dividing and then justifying and then even fighting for the cause of separateness. But what if we invited more kids to more tables? I mean, what if we did that? What would happen if a child were seated at the table in the war room in the White House, for example? It sounds comical at first, but if you think about that scene and a child seated at that table with them. What would happen if a child were to sit at the tables in the United Nations? After all, it is children who are most affected by war, by state-sanctioned violence, by forced migration. And when do we learn anyway that political borders matter at all? When my children cross a state line, how will they know? Today, it's maybe a welcome sign, welcome to Alabama. Once upon a time, it might have been a state police car waiting to find out if a black family was driving after sundown in their state or county. And what we have learned over the past 6 weeks is that drawing borders, erecting walls, well, it doesn't keep people safer at all. It may be an illusion of safety, but it is reinforced with a life dedicated to fear. Now, I'm going to tell a story for the kids out there. It's a little bit scary, and it's very sad. But it is a story that will lead us here, to expand our hearts. And so it is a story worth telling. It's about something that happened in Israel in a kibbutz. A kibbutz, which is an intentional community where people choose to live and work together to support one another in that community. It comes from a BBC report about a peace activist named Vivian Silver, whose death was confirmed in recent days. On October 7th, she was texting with her son, Yonatan. Now, Vivian is one of Israel's best-known campaigners for peace with the Palestinians. She stayed busy in her retirement, continuing her life's work as an activist, holding meetings with international supporters of her group, Women Wage Peace, only just a few days before the Hamas attacks of October 7th. Yonatan rang his mother, and they kept talking as Hamas was moving through the kibbutz where she lived. Perhaps trying to cheer them both up or to stop her 30-something son from worrying too much, she made light of what was happening until both realized it was deadly serious and that she was in mortal danger. They switched to WhatsApp so she could stay quiet, hoping Hamas might bypass the house. Yonatan told the BBC their last text messages. Vivian was typing them out from a cupboard in the house where she was hiding. Vivian wrote that she loved him. She wrote me, "They're inside the house. It's time to stop joking. It's time to say goodbye." And I wrote back, "I love you, Mom. I have no words. I'm with you. Then she writes, I feel you. And then that was it. That's the last message. I feel you. Rebecca Solnit wrote in The Faraway Nearby, empathy is the capacity to feel what you do not literally feel. I feel for you, people say. If physical pain defines the boundaries of the body, you participate in the social body, in a metaphysical bond with those you empathize with, whose pain pains you. Some empathy must be learned and then imagined by perceiving the suffering of others and translating it into one's own experience of suffering, and then therefore suffering a little with them. Empathy can be a story you tell yourself about what it must be like to be that other person. But lack of empathy is also often a story about why the sufferer deserved it, or why that person or his category have nothing to do with you. Whole societies can be taught not to feel, to disassociate from their marginal and minority members, just as people can and do erase the humanity of those close to them. Empathy makes you imagine the sensation of torture, or hunger, or loss. You make that person into yourself. You inscribe their suffering on your own body or heart or mind, and then you respond to their suffering as if it were your own. Physical pain defines the physical boundaries of the self, but these identifications that I'm talking about, they define a larger self, a map of affections and alliances, and the limits of this psychic self are nothing more nor less than the limits of love, which is to say, love enlarges, it annexes affectionately. At its utmost, love dissolves all boundaries. So if you are feeling heartbroken, anguished, enraged, or overwhelmed, it is your empathy that has brought you to this point. And your empathy is beautiful. We are universalists. We are Unitarian Universalists, but we are universalists, which means our heart is a big tent, and you got to let everybody in. Now, I admit that I have not always known the right thing to say in these days of late, other than the word ceasefire. See, we must lift our voices to stop this terrible war. We can still do it. We can still write letters to our senators who, by the way, have been silent. And because of the size of our hearts and the size of our empathy, we must use our power to try and stop the unconscionable violence against Palestinians, even as we demand the release of hostages back to Israel. So we can do both. I have not been active on social media because sometimes I wonder if that too is a performance, if it's a stand-in for real action. Hope I didn't lose every Xennial right now. But I just wonder. I'm not saying definitely, I'm just wondering. And if you are moved to write a post on social media, I hope you will also write an email or a letter or make a phone call to your representative. They do need to hear from you. And I do not know if our words or actions have the true power to turn the tides of violence. But I do know that in order to stay faithful to our Unitarian Universalist religious tradition, the one that believes in the goal of world peace and the worth and dignity of human life, we must try. We have got to try. We must try, or else we risk losing the whole thread, the thread of our connection, our empathy. Because then we will become accommodated to the division accommodated to the war, accommodated to some false narrative exoticizing the issue, that it's too complex or ancient for anybody to understand. That's not true. We do know what is right. As UU minister Kendall Gibbons wrote, in the end, if our liberal faith teaches us nothing else, surely it teaches us this, that there is no us and them, that only evil ever results from thinking that humanity can be divided into those who matter and those who don't. We are in it together for whatever this life and this world are worth. So mostly, since I haven't always known what to say, mostly I just lean into the pastoral response, the personal response. I may not know exactly what step to take, and so I start with a single relationship. I have been direct messaging and emailing and calling my Jewish friends and my Muslim friends, letting them know they are on my heart, letting them know that I am so sorry for their terror and their fear. I support their right to exist. I support their right to have total freedom, but I've got to tell them that now. I have to let them know now. But the good news is our empathy is infinite. Our empathy is not some precious resource we have to hoard or keep. It is infinite in its power. And I know empathy is not a full answer. I know it's not a full answer, but it is a beginning. May our empathy lead us not to steel ourselves against our enemies, but to open the door to new friends, too. See, our empathy helps us open our umbrellas to offer shelter to those who need it most. So if you have had, battlegrounds exist everywhere. And maybe you've had one in your own family in recent years, in your own home. Maybe the Thanksgiving table has gotten a little smaller over time in your life. And I want to say that maybe this year, instead of having a smaller table, maybe you reach out to someone else, someone you don't know quite as well, and invite them into your home. Or maybe, even braver still, you reach out and ask someone if they would host you and invite you over for Thanksgiving. Now that's an act of courage you don't really hear about too often. Or maybe you spend your day this year cooking the big meal at Nicholas' house or another shelter, and you laugh and eat alongside people who would otherwise be spending their evening on the street. But if you are filled with overwhelm or dread for the holidays, I just want you to know you have options. You have options that can open the umbrella of your heart and let someone else in to take shelter or sanctuary. I didn't hear it. So as we think about setting the table and giving thanks this year, maybe this year we invite some new friends or acquaintances, or invite chosen family, or people who are truly in need of your warmth and your soul food. Because there are battlefields everywhere. Out there in the world, and also in our homes and communities too, there is so much brokenness. And so as we break bread, may we find little and big ways to break down borders in our lives. We can start close in. We can start small. Just get rid of the kids' table. You hear me, kids? The pastor said, make it a long table. Or if you are an adult, maybe you sit at the kids' table this year and you learn something new. I want to close with the closing passage from Joy Harjo, the poet Joy Harjo, Muskogee Creek poet, and her poem, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, where she writes, "We give thanks for the story, for all parts of the story, because it was by the light of those challenges we knew ourselves. We asked for forgiveness. We laid down our burdens next to each other. May it be so."
Yeah.
you find a way to lift your umbrella and invite someone to take shelter with you. And make a longer table. Raise your voice for peace with the politicians. Raise your voice. And make a sanctuary for someone who needs it. Tell a true story of colonization and resilience. This is the way we give thanks for the hope that sustains. Through children who are watching us to see if we will open the tents of our hearts and let everybody in.